answered this question already? I don't know.
Yeah.
Did we?
Oh, you asked me, like...
Yes.
Teams of
yes.
Oh,
we got some people. Hello. Everyone. Oh, got rid of that. Delete comment. Delete comment. I figured out how to take that off there. All right, Tom. Looks like Dr. Nick's chiming in here, so we'll approve him. And Costas, welcome. You and I are probably going to have to buddy up here because the framing is tight. All right, let's see if we can get Dr. Nick in here, and then we'll get started. Welcome, everybody, to our live Q&A. So we're a little bit, oh, there we go, Dr. Nick. Hey, Dr. Nick.
Hi.
Beautiful betta back.
I think we might be able to get this working today. I got a stand for my camera and everything.
Nice. We can hear you loud and clear.
Good. Okay, and I got it on Do Not Disturb, so hopefully no interruptions.
Perfect. All right, so got a few people in here so far, 3 people. Welcome, everybody, 4 people. We're going to go ahead and start here in a few minutes. We have our resident experts. Let's get a little closer here. Maybe let's back up. I'm Ian. I work for LiveAquaria in the marketing team. Patrick, he's on the husbandry team here. Hello. And then we got Dr. Nick phoning in from, I believe, California. And yeah, he's our resident veterinarian. He's our expert on hand, one of the experts on hand. Go ahead and give a little bit about yourself there, Dr. Nick, if you like.
Okay, so I'm a veterinarian. I've been working with aquatic animals for over 40 years. I've studied aquatic veterinary medicine. Actually, tomorrow, or actually today after this call, I'm leaving for Rhode Island to teach a class on aquatic veterinary medicine for the AquaVet program at Roger Williams University in Rhode Island. So I'll be on a plane after this, and then tomorrow I'll be there lecturing. But I teach aquatic veterinary medicine all around the world to various veterinary conferences, and I'm the editor of the Aquatic Veterinarian Journal, which is for the World Aquatic Veterinary Medical Association. I've got a book out on koi. It's called Advanced Koi Care, and I'm in the process of writing another book on tropical aquarium fish husbandry and welfare. So keeping busy. Plus, I do work with LiveAquaria in helping with health issues.
Awesome. Well, always a pleasure to have you. And yeah, we're just about ready. We're about 1 minute too. So without further ado, thank you all for joining. Just a really quick kind of a recap of what we're doing here. We are taking common questions sent in to us by you, the consumer, and then we're providing expert opinion, our feedback based on our own experience. So we have a lot of good experience here in this digital room. So we're happy to provide. We have a list of questions here, but we want to obviously get questions in the live chat also. So if you've got a question about aquarium keeping, if something's dumping you, or maybe you're having an issue with your aquarium, feel free to share it in the live chat here, and we'll do our best to answer it. We're actually going to prioritize those too. So without further ado, I'll go ahead and get started here. This one actually came in last week, I believe, from a user on Instagram. So they actually purchased a white cheek and a powder blue tang from a few weeks prior to this message. They're still not eating frozen food, but just seaweed. He's tried all frozen food, but just ignored it. So I'll actually pitch that one to Patrick here.
Yes, this is a common question we get for the items that we send from the coral farm is, what was the animal eating there before you sent it out? And, you know, this question kind of threw me because it's kind of the opposite, you know, of what happens is because usually the fish have no problems getting adjusted to frozen foods, and then it's kind of difficult to wean them off that and get them on a more appropriate diet, like for this type of fish that should be more plant-based or algae-based. So this is, I guess, I wouldn't say it's a bad thing. It's a good thing because the tang's already eating seaweed, and that's what you want them to be eating, you know, towards the once they're well adjusted. So, but all I can say is that in the coral farm, we feed our LiveAquaria branded frozen food, which is a mixture. Well, we mix a couple of them together. We do the brine shrimp, the mysis shrimp, and the cyclops. So we mix all three of those together, and then we offer those to all the fish. And that's usually kind of the first step with new fish. They usually go right for the brine shrimp. That's kind of like candy to them, and they usually start eating that. And then from there, we start introducing a variety of pelleted and freeze-dried foods too. So New Life Spectrum, that's a big one. We go through a lot of that. They offer nice probiotic food, pelleted food. So we like to get them on that, especially for some of the more finicky. We like them eating that really well before we offer them for sale. So
cool. Dr. Nick, do you have anything you'd like to add to that?
And I think feeding a variety of food is important, because then you can find out might eat one thing but not another thing, and so by giving it a variety, you'll give it more options to eat, and maybe better get it to start eating one thing over the other. But we don't want it to only eat one thing. Like Patrick said, we don't want them to just be eating something like frozen food where they might not be getting all the nutrients they need compared to a varied diet.
Okay. Thank you both. Actually, there's a question in chat here, so it might actually be a little bit interesting for us to answer. Why do Moorish idols from diarrhea keep having internal parasites when I get them? Patrick, I don't know if you have something for that?
Well, Moorish idols can be finicky. I do know, in the coral farm here, we tend to lace our frozen food with General Cure, which is a mix of metronidazole and praziquantel. We add that to the food, and we offer that first feeding every day, and that helps with internal parasites. And Moorish idols, that's an expert-only fish, so that should be expert-only fish are 30-day fish. So that fish is offered that food for a minimum of 30 days before it's offered for sale. So, getting that fish, you should quarantine it and continue to offer it those General Cure laced foods in order for it to really help rid the gut of any internal parasites. I don't know, Dr. Nick could probably elaborate a little bit more on the internal issues they have.
Yeah, there used to be a lot of different medicated fish foods available, but because of various regulations, USDA concerns, there aren't over-the-counter fish foods available that have medications already in them. There used to be, but there aren't really now. However, if you do work with an aquatic veterinarian, they can help you develop, or they can develop or procure medicated food. There is a thing called a veterinary food directive, where a veterinarian can write a prescription for a medicated food. Sometimes it's hard to find a vet that's interested or that can help you. There are a number available. One thing I mentioned earlier about the World Aquatic Veterinary Medical Association, on their website, there is a Find a Vet function. It's wavma.org, and you can go to the website. There's an option to find a veterinarian by doing a search by your zip code or your state, and find veterinarians that might be able to assist in procuring medicated food.
Okay. So Brett followed up, quarantined everyone in a state aquarium, all ate for 2 months and got skinny and died. That's unfortunate to hear. I guess, I don't know, any thoughts on that, I guess?
Yeah, like I said, you probably should, if they're continuing to lose weight, continue to offer those same foods. Mm-hmm. And another thing too, I guess I forgot to mention earlier, is that once you put the medication on the food, you want to make sure you feed the food off relatively quickly. You don't want the food to be sitting out for hours, because it will spoil quicker, and then it won't taste right, and the fish won't go for it. So you got to continue to make up that food fresh, put the medication on it, and then offer it to the fish right away.
I hope that helps, Brett. Thanks so much for your question. And thank you for your business in the past. Obviously, we always strive to do the best we can with aquatic life first, and offer you guys the best selection through the divers website. So appreciate any feedback, and really do appreciate it. So thank you. This next question I'm going to pitch to Dr. Nick here. This question is, WTF is with the L number for Plecos?
Okay. Yeah, so that's kind of a weird thing there on the Plecos. The easy answer to that is Plecos, there's so many of them. I actually have a number I looked up here. I'm going to try to find that question on. Okay, so the Plecos come up with the L number. The L stands for Loricariidae, which is the family of catfish that the Plecos and Loricariids are in. It's the largest family of catfish with over 680 species described so far. They're actually finding more and more of these, and so what happens is they'll collect these from the wild. They say, hey, these are really great fish, let's sell them. What are they? We don't know. We don't know what they are. We know it's a Loricariid, so they'll give it an L for that, and then a number based on what number is the latest number of fish they're found. And so that'll be L50, L100. And so that's just an abbreviated number, a name for, it's an unknown species of Loricariid. And the problem is, we don't really know what it is. It hasn't been studied by science. And then eventually they do get studied, they get a name, they get a scientific name. And by that point, and many times, everybody's already used to using the L number. So we just, still use the L number. Ideally, once we've described a species and have a scientific name, we should switch to using that name for it. But with as many of these Loricariids that are coming into the pet industry, it can get real confusing. And a lot of them look the same too, so that they're very similar to other ones. And we might think they're two different fish, but it's actually the same fish from either different seasons or different regions. Or they could look the same but be totally different species once we examine it. The latest research, instead of doing morphology, which means you're measuring and looking at body parts, is DNA analysis. And that's making a big change in how we are classifying fish. A lot of fish are changing because once we study the DNA makeup, we find that they're either more closely related or less closely related than what we had originally anticipated. So that's kind of the general idea. Patrick, you probably have dealt with this as well.
Yeah, I mean, it can be really confusing too, because it's like they were discovering and finding all these different Plecos, and they were just giving them an L number. And once science, like you said, finally caught up to it, they found out that, all right, well, just because this one looks the same, it may not, or it's similar looking, but they gave it a different L number. They went back to it. It's like, all right, well, this is the same species, just from a different river. So then that, like, gold nugget Plecos have 3 or 4 different L numbers. And then there's the LDA numbers, which is another German publication back in the late 80s, Plecos and LDA numbers. So then it got even more confusing. So then you had L numbers and LDA numbers, and now they're having the same problem with Cories too. Not a problem, but there's just so many different Cories out there that they're giving them C numbers or C numbers as well. And sometimes it's just easier to call them by the L number, So.
Yeah.
Cool.
But yeah, that's a good question.
Awesome. Well, actually, this next question came from our own staff. Is this something that they're kind of wondering about? Just really kind of even just everyday questions like how often, how much should I feed my fish? I'll let you take that one, Patrick.
So when fish, a lot of people, they just kind of just sit there and like throw in food after food after food. The fish still seem hungry and so on. And before they know it, their tank is polluted and, it makes a lot more work for themselves. But honestly, you want to give them several small feedings a day. I always used to think, the best way to do it is, throw some food in there and the fish should eat it all before it hits the bottom, which is ideal if you have a lot of surface swimming fish. They tend not to go to the bottom to scavenge. So you want to make sure that you're feeding a variety of food if you have a variety of fish in the tank. So if you have surface feeding fish, you want to make sure you offer flake food. If you have middle swimming fish, they tend to scavenge and go to the surface. So you want to offer them a variety of flakes and slow sinking pellets. And if you have bottom dwelling fish, you want to make sure you give them a scavenging type food, something that sinks to the bottom. That way all the fish in the tank have an ample amount of time to eat. Just giving one specific type of food may leave your cories out on the bottom because you have, ferocious giant danios that eat all the food before the bottom. So several small feedings a day is ideal. Here in the coral farm, we feed a minimum of 4 times a day. So minimum.
Dr. Nick, anything?
And also,
Go ahead.
yeah, so you can tell if you're overfeeding or underfeeding by how long it takes the fish to eat. So if you put your food in and after about 5 minutes, the fish are pretty much either done eating and there's food left over, or even if they're still eating, if there's a lot of food left, you've probably put too much food in. If it's been a minute and all the food is gone, you probably haven't given them enough. So a general rule of thumb is about 3 to 5 minutes of food consumption should be about the right amount if you're feeding, 1, 2, or 3 times a day. And if the fish have any uneaten food, you do want to remove that so it doesn't pollute the water. Well, kind of an exception to that rule is if you have nocturnal fish that eat at night. So if you're feeding during the daytime and you have fish that hide during the day and only come out at night, maybe some species of loaches or Plecos or eels, you have to ensure that when you're putting the lights out at night, that you're putting the appropriate food in for them so that they can forage during the night and find their food. But if all your fish are day swimming, active schooling fish, you can just watch them eat, and you can tell if they're still hungry when you're done feeding them or if they've been satisfied. And don't overfeed. That's probably a little worse than underfeeding.
Awesome. Real quick, Brett says, he feeds his tangs like 6 times a day, all different foods, and they eat it instantly every time. So that's good to hear. Good to hear.
They have very high metabolism, so they need to eat constantly.
All right, next question for Dr. Nick. Best way to acclimate plants into a freshwater aquarium?
So plants can carry some bacteria, they can carry algae, and depending on what situation they were in before, there's a potential for carrying in either like the encysted stage of Ichthyopteris or some eggs from gill flukes, which are egg layers. Skin flukes are live bearers, so that wouldn't be an issue. But there are a few possible problems that could come in with plants. So if you're buying them from an aquarium where fish are in that aquarium, you probably want to do a quarantine on the plants just like you would want to quarantine new fish. So you put them into a separate aquarium, you just let them sit in there and with aeration, filtration if you have it, light so that the plants continue to grow. And if you give them 2 to 4 weeks of growth in there, you should be pretty clear of any parasites that might have come with the fish. There is another option. There's a few chemical treatments that people have done, including like potassium permanganate, maybe even a formalin or a bleach dip, where you make a diluted solution of a disinfectant or oxidizing product, even hydrogen peroxide, and then you do a rinse or a soak of the plants for a short period of time in that, with the idea of killing off microorganisms but not killing the plant. And then rinse them in fresh water, and then you can, again, either quarantine them, or if you have to, just put them into your regular aquarium. And there are online a number of different videos on how to disinfect plants before putting them in the aquarium. And Patrick had also brought up something about legality too, if you want to mention that.
Oh, yeah.
Collecting.
I know a lot of people like to take stuff from the wild. You got to be really careful about that because a lot of even plant life is protected. So it's really messy, regulation wise. So I would just avoid it. And you can also, you got to be careful too, because where it takes something from the wild, you could bring in some dragonfly larvae and they could prey on your fish, prey on your shrimp, stuff like that. So you definitely want to do that. Yeah, it can get for sure. Yeah. You don't want to release anything in the wild, or you don't want to take anything from the wild.
Absolutely.
You just avoid it altogether.
So quick shout out to you, Dr. Nick. Patrick, Brett from the chat says you're all so knowledgeable and helpful. Thanks so much. So
You're welcome. Thank
you
you.
both, and thank you, Brett, for joining us, as well as everyone else. Just a quick break here. We do this typically every Wednesday at 1 p.m. CST. We're actually having some local internet issues, so we felt it best to push it to today, Thursday, just to make sure we could deliver for you guys. So just as a quick reminder, we do this every Wednesday at 1 p.m. I always recommend you guys go check out the Facebook events page. That's where we have the recurring events set up. You can RSVP. You can ask your questions ahead of time there, if you don't answer that. As well as the live dive sale. That also happens every week on Mondays at 7:30 p.m. CST. So here, as well as Steve, the team is working on selecting some really nice Divers Den WYSIWYG store items to offer up in these live dive sales at a discount to you. We also offer free shipping and giveaways and chances to win a $100 gift certificate typically. So I highly suggest anyone watching check out our Facebook events page. We've got more events coming up every Monday and every Wednesday for you guys. So
yeah, we're always looking for suggestions too, for items to put in there. And if it's your opportunity to see the animals kind of doing their thing, swimming around or whatnot, it's just not a still picture. So
all right, moving along then. Next question is, how often should I do water changes? Yeah, how often should I do water changes? Go ahead, Patrick.
Well, I mean, that is a loaded question for sure, but in theory, smaller, more frequent water changes are better than larger, less frequent ones. Generally, I like to say, hey, if you have the time to do a 10 to 15% water change a week, do it. That's better than doing a larger once a month water change, because fish, as we all know, they like a very stable environment. So the more water you take out, you run the risk of changing the water parameters. Even though you may be improving them, it's going to be a drastic change and stress the fish out. So by doing them more frequently, you're actually going to be slightly improving the water quality, and you won't stress the fish out, because once you introduce stress into the picture, all types of crazy things might happen. So we want to eliminate that as much as possible. So that's it. I mean, that's it, in a world, but if you can do 20% every other week, that's okay too, even 25%, but I wouldn't really change more than 25, maybe 30% of water.
I've always done 25% as a rule of thumb.
But yeah, if you can do weekly water changes, that and it really, like I said, it's a loaded question. It really depends on what's in your tank, the bioload. I mean, if you have a bunch of smaller tropical fish, small water changes be all it needs. But if it's a tank full of larger predatory fish that eat, live feeder fish, or they're pretty messy eaters like goldfish or koi or Oscars or any type of cichlids in general, maybe looking at doing more frequent water 2 to 3 times a week or whatever. It really depends on what is stocked in the aquarium and the stocking density too. If you have a lot of fish in there, plan to do more water changes.
Dr. Nick, anything from your end?
Yeah, one thing I'd like to add there as well is, of course, testing your water is important so that you know if you're starting to get parameters change. What happens over time in an aquarium is the pH will tend to drop due to metabolic acids that are excreted by the fish, so gradually the pH drops. The other thing that causes that is the alkalinity will decrease, so the alkalinity is the carbonate hardness. The carbonates are consumed by both the minerals that the fish is taking into its body through its gills, as well as the bacteria and the biological filtration. Use carbonates for the process of nitrification. And so if you have lowered alkalinity, or over time as the alkalinity decreases, the biofiltration will become less effective. And so you test your water and you find out that your alkalinity has become very, very low, the pH has dropped, and that can be harmful for the fish. If you did a massive water change, as Patrick mentioned, you could suddenly shift the pH and all those other things that could be harmful. If you do more frequent, smaller water changes, you'll maintain that alkalinity and the pH at the proper level. But the thing you should test also is your tap water. you might find that your tap water has low alkalinity to begin with. And so it would be very important that you do more frequent water changes to keep the alkalinity up, or even add some carbonate supplements to keep the alkalinity higher. And if your tap water contains phosphate, then every time you do a water change, you're increasing the phosphate, which can accumulate in the aquarium as well. So it's good to know what your water has for as far as pH, alkalinity, phosphorus, phosphates, to see what the normal value is, and then test your aquarium. If you start seeing the pH drop, the alkalinity drop, or the nitrate going up, it's time to do a water change.
Awesome. A quick question then for the chat here from Jason. He's on the lookout for golden weather loaches. All the pictures on the interweb show them with black eyes, but all the websites and local fish stores have red eyes. I don't want red eyes. Why would this be? Dr. Nick, would you have anything on that?
Yeah, so the true albino is going to have red eyes, and that means there's no melanin pigment including in the iris of the eye, so the eye looks red. You're actually looking at the blood flowing through the iris when you see a red eye, and so that would be a true albino. Now you can have a amelanistic or leucistic species, which is not a true albino, so it'll still have low black pigment, but it'll still have other pigments which will make the eye not look red. Okay, so that's the scientific part behind the color difference. Now, what you're looking for is a non-albino but amelanistic dojo or weather loach. It's just a matter of who's breeding them, how available they are. It's interesting that for some reason that species is illegal in certain states. So some states you might not find them at all because there's a prohibition against the weather loach in some states. I guess that's considered something that might survive in the wild because it can survive colder weather than most tropical fish. But if you're looking, searching for a golden one that's not a true albino, you'll just have to keep checking different retail sites, websites. And I don't know if we can look at LiveAquaria if there's an option to order those through a specific supplier or not. I haven't looked at them lately, so I'm not sure what's available.
I mean, we could certainly check with our sourcing team to see if we can find some. I know when I was a kid, I grew up in illegal. Everybody was looking for them because they wanted to put them in their goldfish or their koi or whatnot, but I was never able to get them. So.
Okay. So this next question, I think, is kind of tied along to the plants question a little bit we just answered, but can I add sandstones or shells into my aquarium from nature? Patrick, I'll let you take that one.
So, yeah, taking stuff from the wild, you got to make sure, I mean, we'll do it. I've done it. You got to make sure that you get it from an area that is free of pollution, for sure. You don't want to just go to the side of the road and grab a rock and throw it in your tank. That could be a big problem. You want to make sure you get it from I don't know, maybe a river or a lake or something that's already a somewhat safe environment for aquatic life. Boiling is an option. Some people do that. Some people, put them in a little bit of a bleach solution that will sanitize the rock or sand. Shells, you got to be careful because that's, calcium base that will dissolve in the water. So, as long as you don't have a lot of them, it shouldn't really affect your water chemistry much. You also got to be careful of iron deposits too. If the rock looks like it's rusting, I wouldn't put that in your tank as well. But most granite and stuff like that, those rocks, you can scrub them really well, rinse them off with hot water, and like I said, if it comes from a pretty clean source, I wouldn't worry too much about it.
We actually have our large area. We have a large freshwater tank with a bunch of angels, cories, some plecos. I believe all the sand came from one of the former employees' lakes itself. Yeah. So they took sand from the lake, I believe, and yeah, it's doing well. I mean, it looks nice too. It actually looks really nice. So it's possible, but yeah, I would follow recommendations. Dr. Nick, anything from your end?
I think Patrick pretty well covered that. A real quick anecdote is when I was first starting out with aquariums, I was 9 years old, and not really knowing a lot about aquariums at the time, I put seashells in my freshwater aquarium, and I noticed over time that the seashells were dissolving, which looking back in retrospect, I realized, not knowing it at the time, but the water that I was using was our house water, which was softened water. And the soft water doesn't really have a lot of minerals in it, and so the alkalinity would be low and the pH would tend to drop. So by adding the seashells in there, the seashells would dissolve because of the low pH and the low alkalinity. But that was a good thing. Inadvertently, I was probably helping the fish because the seashells dissolved, releasing calcium carbonate, which raised the pH, raised the alkalinity, and kept the fish safer, the water quality better than had I not had the shells in there. So that's a lesson I learned about alkalinity and pH and either limestone or shells that contain calcium carbonate.
Right. A lot of African, hobbies use a seashell-based substrate because of that. It's like a natural buffer. It's constantly always dissolving and eroding back into the water, keeping the water chemistry nice where it's supposed to be.
Brett says, my seashells did fine in mine. They were probably fake. Only tried one.
Fake, or I feel like some of them back in the day, they used to put a clear on them too.
Oh, okay.
I don't know if it was some type of urethane or something like that, but shellac.
All right, so I think we got time for one more question here. I guess a good rule of thumb for knowing how many fish to keep in an aquarium. I'll let Nick lead this one.
So it really varies by the size of the aquarium, the filter that you have on your aquarium, the type of fish you're including. Are they small fish? Are they big fish? What's their body mass? So there's a lot of things that go into the equation on how many fish you can add, the quality of water that you have that you're starting with. But I'll use, if you look through a lot of old aquarium books, they'll tell you like 1 inch of fish per gallon of water. And if you're talking about guppies and neon tetras, that rule is probably okay. So if you had a 10-gallon aquarium, you could put 10 1-inch fish in it. So like 10 zebra danios or guppies would be okay in a 10-gallon tank. But you couldn't put one 10-inch Oscar in a 10-gallon tank. So that wouldn't apply for a large-bodied fish. So you have to take the mass of the fish. So goldfish, koi, cichlids, and some other real dense fish, you probably want maybe 2 or 3 gallons of water for every inch of body. So an 8-inch Oscar would probably, you want like 40 gallons for it. So that would be what, about 5 gallons per inch of fish. So that, so you have to use a little bit of common sense in there. Unfortunately, historically, goldfish are often kept in very small bowls or aquariums, which are not really appropriate for them, and they really require a larger space. Koi, I tend to go with koi needing probably like 10 gallons per inch of fish. So if you have a 30-inch koi, which is, they can get that big or even bigger, you need a minimum of 300 gallons or more for that size fish. So arowanas, things of that nature are really big fish. Patrick mentioned earlier about feeding. If it's a fish that is an aggressive eater and messy, you're going to want a bigger aquarium with more water to maintain the water quality more than if it was just, small tropical fish that eat either pellets or flake food. So the general rule is good for small tropical fish, 1 inch per gallon, but that's assuming you have good aeration, good filtration, you're doing regular water changes, and keeping your filtration clean, and monitoring your water quality. So that's a starting point, but it's not an end-all rule.
Yeah, and you also want to make sure you keep in mind the adult size, the potential of the fish too, because even though you may buy a fish and keep it in a small tank, it will grow. So you got to keep that in mind as well too.
And that's really like a lot of what we've done on our website with our individual product pages is, obviously we're trying to, make sure that we're educating the consumer, you guys, as much as possible, to make sure that, you have the right information. So on every PDP, we have a minimum tank size. And it's always coming from that perspective, just like Patrick said, of like, well, what's the ideal long-term environment for this fish to make sure that, it doesn't get a 2-inch fish and then put it into a 25-gallon aquarium, and then suddenly it's like, well, this is, obviously a tank buster in this situation, so we don't want definitely check out liveaquaria.com. A lot of great information on there too. Each PDP has a product page, a ton of information, as well as our articles, and definitely more to come too. So we got one more question from Sid. I'm going to go a little over here. Are seahorses hard to take care of? I'm trying to get maybe a small tank. I'm going to let Patrick take that one.
Seahorses, yes. Seahorses can be tricky. I would avoid wild ones at all costs. Don't even try it. Most of them are actually, threatened, endangered, whatever you want to call it. Always go captive bred, because if they're captive bred, they're most likely eating prepared foods. And if you go with one that is about 3 inches tall or so, it can probably handle an adult brine shrimp no problem. So that's an ideal size that you want to look for, a 3-inch plus captive bred seahorse. Another tricky thing with seahorses is they're extremely finicky eaters, so they cannot have any competition for food. So if you are setting up an aquarium and you want a seahorse, you're going to be very limited on tank mates. Maybe a mandarin goby, nothing that's going to be a crazy, aggressive swimmer or anything like that, because the seahorses are going to be really shy and they may starve because of that. Like we just keep talking about, with water volume, filtration, all that and stuff like that. You don't want to go too small, because the smaller the volume it is, the less biological filtration you have, and the trickier the tank is going to be to handle, to maintain. So a minimum of a tank size of a 30-gallon for salt water would, for somebody that's new getting into it, should be pretty manageable to take care of. But seahorses, as long as you, like I said, you go with captive bred and you go with at least 3 inches, should be pretty easy to care for. And make sure you don't put them in any aggressive eaters or fast fish.
All right. Well, Dr. Nick, I'll give you the last word there. Do you have anything you'd like to add to that, or?
Yeah, the hardest part about seahorses is getting them to eat. So if you can get them to eat, you'll probably be successful with that. I consult with a couple public aquariums where they've been able to even get the seahorses to reproduce in the aquariums. So, we know it can be done. And as Patrick said, starting with captively bred ones will be more successful than wild collected ones.
Awesome.
I had another thought kind of related to this. These are some really great questions that we're getting over these last few weeks. It might be a nice idea to summarize the questions and the answers in a document that we could post on LiveAquaria. So like a frequently asked question area that people could come back and look at these questions and answers at another time.
That's a great call out, Dr. Nick. We'll definitely look at doing that. I think that's something we will definitely look at doing and having ready for the next slide. So, great idea. Folks, you can definitely be on the lookout for that. That's definitely part of what we'll do coming up here. All right, I think we've gone a little bit over, but I really appreciate everyone joining in today, providing your questions, providing your feedback. Of course, Dr. Nick, thank you so much. Patrick, thank you so much. I really appreciate you guys' time. You guys are really busy people. So always a pleasure. As I mentioned before, we do this every Wednesday at 1 p.m. CST. So if you haven't already, go to our Facebook events page. Make sure you sign up for the upcoming recurring events. We do this every Wednesday at 1 p.m. CST, where we take your questions and answer them live. Also, we do a live sale at 7:30 p.m. every Monday. So go ahead and check out that as well. As Patrick mentioned before, we're always making suggestions on what items to showcase in these live sales. So send them along to us any way you like. We'll add to our list. Best thing to do is to go over to our events page and add it there. But again, without further ado, thank you guys so much for joining us today. Really appreciate it. Always look forward to this every week. Thank you, Patrick. Thank you, Dr. Nick. And until next time, you guys have a
Thank you.
week.
Thanks, guys.